Natalie Brooks sat upright on the stiff wooden bench, her hands clenched in her lap, eyes locked on the man sitting across the courtroom. Andrew Brooks, the man she had married 12 years ago, the father of her children, and now the stranger who couldn't even look her in the eye. She studied his face, the same angular jawline she used to trace with her fingers during late-night talks, now tense with smugness. The same hazel eyes that once looked at her with admiration, now narrowed with calculation. Time hadn't changed him physically, but the warmth had long since drained from his features. What sat in front of her was not the man who once held her while she cried over sleepless nights with a newborn, but someone cold, performative, and distant. 12 years of marriage. 2 children, Ethan, 11, and Lily, 8. A life they had built together. A life she had fought to hold on to when things started slipping. When he became distant. When the late nights at work became early mornings away. When Claire entered the picture. Natalie knew about her. Everyone did. Claire, with her perfect hair and calculated charm, was the woman Andrew had chosen to start over with. Younger. Flashier. Effortless. She was everything Natalie had stopped being the moment she gave birth and shifted her world toward her children. But Natalie wasn't here to fight over infidelity. The court didn't care about betrayal. This hearing was about paperwork, custody, support. Cold, clinical terms for a life that had unraveled slowly, painfully, over years. She could feel Dana, her attorney, watching her from the side. Ready to speak if needed, ready to fight. But Natalie wasn't here to fight anymore, not with Andrew, not for him, not even against him. She was here for Ethan, for Lily, for the pieces of herself she still recognized. The judge entered, and everyone stood. The air in the courtroom was still tense with finality. When they sat again, Andrew leaned back in his chair, confidence oozing from every part of his carefully pressed suit. He looked like he was ready to win something. But Natalie knew this wasn't about winning. It was about surviving. She lowered her gaze, blocking out Andrew's smirk, blocking out Claire sitting quietly behind him, her legs crossed, her face composed in artificial sympathy. Natalie had no more space for rage. What she had now was clarity, and just enough strength left to protect what really mattered. Her children, her peace, her dignity. The legal proceedings wrapped up quickly. Custody was awarded to Natalie, with Andrew granted standard visitation and child support obligations. The judge's voice was even, almost mechanical, but each word landed like a hammer on Natalie's chest. It was final. It was over. At least she thought it was. As the judge prepared to adjourn, Andrew shifted in his seat and cleared his throat. "Your Honor, there's one more thing," he said, his voice smooth but loud enough to silence the room. Natalie felt her body tense. Even Dana looked surprised. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Yes, Mr. Brooks." Andrew leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. "I'd like to formally request the return of certain gifts I gave Natalie during our marriage. Items of significant monetary value." The room went still. Natalie blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Her lawyer stirred beside her, pen freezing mid-note. "Could you clarify what gifts you're referring to?" the judge asked, visibly tired. Andrew didn't miss a beat. Jewelry. A few designer handbags, some art pieces, crystal vases, that sort of thing. I'd also like the silver bracelet I gave her during our 5th anniversary and the emerald necklace. They were expensive, and I believe I should have them back. Natalie stared at him, stunned. That necklace was a gift after Ethan was born, given during one of the few genuine moments they'd shared in recent years. The bracelet had been a comfort piece, something she wore to public events when she needed to pretend their marriage was still intact. Dana leaned in, whispering fiercely, "He has no legal ground for this. Let me respond." But Natalie didn't answer. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Andrew wasn't done. "And I'd like the gifts I gave to the children returned as well," he added, voice steady. "If they're valued over $50. There was a collective intake of breath in the courtroom. Even the judge looked up sharply. "You want the children's gifts returned?" the judge asked, his tone turning sharper. Andrew nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. Their telescope, that music box, the charm bracelet, the books, they were all costly. And I believe I have a right to request their return." Natalie felt something fracture inside her, not from anger, from disbelief. Ethan's telescope, Rose's music box, gifts given out of supposed love, now reduced to line items in a petty inventory. And beside Andrew, Claire sat with an unreadable expression, but Natalie caught the twitch of a satisfied smile tugging at her lips. This wasn't just Andrew's doing. This was Claire's influence too. A calculated effort to humiliate, to strip Natalie of whatever dignity she had left. The judge looked exhausted. Mr. Brooks, I've already stated this is not the appropriate venue for itemize disputes over marital gifts. If you wish to pursue this, it will require a separate hearing and appropriate documentation. Natalie stood. Your Honor, she said, her voice quiet but clear, it won't be necessary. Dana turned to her, startled. Natalie, don't. I'll return everything, she said. Every single item. He can have it all. The judge paused. Yes, Brooks, you're under no obligation to agree to that. I know, Natalie replied, gaze locked on Andrew. But I'm not fighting over things. I'm done holding on to what no longer matters. Claire's smile faltered. Andrew's smirk dimmed. Natalie didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply stood tall, calm, composed, and in full control. And in that moment she didn't lose. She reclaimed herself. The house was quiet that week. Not peaceful, just quiet, like the silence after a storm that's left everything uprooted. Natalie moved through the rooms like a shadow. She carried no anger now, just a tired resolve. The same kind of resolve that had once kept her up through Ethan's fevers and Lily's nightmares. That same stillness now steeled her as she opened drawers, reached into cabinets, and peeled back the years. She started with her own things first. The jewelry box on her dresser held pieces she hadn't worn in months, even years. She opened the lid and stared at the emerald necklace Andrew had mentioned in court. She remembered him fastening it around her neck the night they came home from the hospital with Ethan. He had cried that night, overwhelmed and scared and human. That moment was real. She almost believed in him again because of it. She picked up the necklace, felt its weight in her hand. Then she laid it in a box lined with tissue paper and moved on. The diamond earrings came next. A surprise from a business trip to Paris. He had kissed her cheek and told her she deserved the world. Natalie smiled sadly at the memory, then placed the earrings beside the necklace. One by one, she packed the tokens of their life together. The silver bracelet from their 5th anniversary. The crystal vase from an auction she once cared about. The handbag she never asked for. All placed carefully in boxes, not to preserve their value, but because that's how she was raised. You treat even endings with grace. It should have been easier when she finished her own belongings. But the worst part came next. The children's rooms. She stood at Ethan's door for a long moment, her hand resting on the frame. Then she stepped inside. His room still smelled faintly like him: clean laundry, sport socks, and the faint scent of a cologne he had recently started using, trying to grow up too fast. In the corner stood the telescope Andrew had gifted Ethan for Christmas when he was 10. It had been their bonding ritual for months, naming stars, charting constellations, whispering secrets under the night sky. Natalie crouched down beside it, her fingers brushing the cool metal. She wanted to leave it, wanted to protect it, but she couldn't. She disassembled it piece by piece, wrapping the lenses with bubble wrap, just like she used to wrap Ethan in a towel after bath time. She gathered the astronomy books Andrew had given him, 2 leather-bound and heavy, filled with Ethan's notes and tiny post-its. Next was Lily's room. Soft pink walls, tiny string lights above the bed, stuffed animals arranged in a neat row across the pillows. This room was her safe space. Natalie moved quietly, respectfully, not wanting to disturb the little world her daughter had created. The music box sat on the shelf, still playing the same lullaby it had when Andrew gave it to Lily on her 8th birthday. Natalie wound it gently, just once, and let it sing as she wrapped it in tissue. She added the charm bracelet, small silver trinkets shaped like ballet slippers and stars. The stuffed unicorn from their trip to the zoo. Each piece hurt to part with. These weren't just objects, they were bits of magic, of memory, of trust. Natalie packed them all. When she was done, the living room was filled with boxes stacked neatly like soldiers awaiting deployment. They looked so harmless. But inside each one was a piece of her children's wonder, her own quiet heartbreak, and the remains of a family that no longer existed. She sat on the couch, physically drained, emotionally wrung dry. The silence pressed in again, thicker now. But Natalie didn't cry. This wasn't sadness anymore. It was clarity. Cold, steady, necessary clarity. Andrew could have his trophies. Claire could parade them around in her designer home. Natalie had something better. She had her children, and that would always be enough. The next afternoon, Just as the sun dipped behind the trees lining their quiet street, Natalie heard the familiar creak of the front door. "Mom, you home?" Ethan's voice rang out, steady but curious. "In here, sweetheart," she called gently from the living room. Ethan and Lily stepped inside, backpacks slung over their shoulders. Lily's cheeks were rosy from the walk home, and Ethan was already pulling off his sneakers. Their eyes landed on the boxes. Stacks of them. Neat, labeled, taped shut. "Are we moving?" Lily asked, her voice small. Natalie rose from the couch, brushing her palms on her jeans. She had rehearsed what she'd say all morning, but the lump in her throat made it hard to start. "No, honey, we're not moving," she said softly. "These are just some things your dad asked me to return." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Return? Like, what things?" Natalie hesitated, then knelt beside him. "Some gifts. From before. Things he gave me, and some things he gave you both." Lily's eyes widened. "Like my music box." Natalie nodded, her voice tight. "Yes." Ethan stiffened. "You mean the telescope? My books?" She nodded again. For a moment, the silence stretched between them like glass. Then Ethan's jaw clenched. Why would he do that? Who even asks for stuff back from their own kids? Natalie placed a hand on his shoulder. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe he thought those things mattered more than they do." "But they matter to us," Lily said, barely above a whisper. Natalie turned to her daughter, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "They do. They mattered a lot. But what matters more is that we're okay, that we have each other." Ethan shook his head. "He doesn't even want us to have memories." Natalie sighed. "He's hurting too, in his own way. And sometimes when people hurt, they try to control things they think they can, even if it doesn't make sense." "But he's the one who left," Ethan snapped. "Not us." "I know," Natalie said quietly. "And that's not your fault, or Lily's, or mine." Lily leaned into her, wrapping small arms around Natalie's waist. Ethan stood still, fists clenched, blinking hard. Natalie held them both. "I wish I could protect you from all of this," she whispered. "But what I can do is show you that letting go, even when it's hard, is not weakness. It's strength." Ethan looked up at her then, eyes no longer angry, just tired. "I don't want the telescope if it means dealing with him." Natalie smiled sadly. "You'll have another one. A better one. One that's just yours. No strings." The three of them sat on the couch, surrounded by the boxed-up past. And for the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel so heavy. The morning of the return felt colder than it should have, not in temperature, but in weight. Natalie loaded the boxes into the back of her SUV, each one labeled with black marker jewelry. Handbags, personal items, kids' gifts. She had packed them with care, not because she wanted to, but because she refused to let Andrew and Claire say she had done it sloppily or out of spite. She arrived at the law office Andrew had designated. Claire was already there, of course, waiting at the entrance in a sleek gray coat, her phone in one hand, an expectant smile on her face. Natalie didn't speak as she unloaded. She carried each box in herself, not because no one offered to help, but because she wanted it done on her terms. Claire glanced at the boxes, her eyes gleaming like a child counting presents under a Christmas tree. "Is this all of it?" she asked, voice syrupy. Natalie didn't look at her. "Every single thing he asked for, down to the last dollar." The receptionist nodded toward the back room, and Natalie signed the release forms without hesitation. Claire lingered nearby, like a vulture circling a carcass. When the last box was stacked neatly on the receiving table, Natalie turned to go. But Claire couldn't resist. "You didn't have to make this so easy, you know," she said with a smirk. "Most women would have made it messy." Natalie finally looked at her. "It's easy," she said calmly, "when you realize none of it matters anymore." Claire blinked, caught off guard. "I hope you both enjoy it," Natalie added, voice cool. "It takes a certain kind of hunger to decorate your life with leftovers from someone else's broken home." Claire didn't speak again. Natalie walked out into the sharp morning light, the wind catching the edge of her coat. She felt no victory in her chest, no satisfaction, only clarity. She had done what she said she would. She had returned everything. And now she was free. Not because she'd won, but because she had nothing left to prove. The house was quieter now, not empty, just lighter. The boxes were gone, the clutter of memories removed. Natalie stood in the doorway of Ethan's room, taking in the space where the telescope once stood. A small rectangle of carpet, less worn than the rest, was the only evidence it had ever been there. She thought she would feel hollow, but she didn't. Instead, she felt clean. Letting go hadn't broken her. It had stripped away what wasn't hers to carry anymore. The lies, the weight of pretending, the pressure to protect someone who had long stopped protecting her. She brewed a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching as golden sunlight poured across the floor. The house no longer whispered reminders of what had been. Now, it waited ready to be filled again. Not with things, but with something better. Peace, laughter, realness. Natalie pulled out her old journal, the one she had kept tucked in a drawer for years. She began to write again. Not about Andrew. Not even about the pain, but about the little things, Lily's freckles multiplying every summer. Ethan's newfound love for cooking. The silence in the house that no longer haunted her but held her gently. She made a list. Buy Ethan a new telescope, one he chooses himself. Take Lily to the ballet next month. Get rid of the last wedding photos still hiding in the hallway closet. These weren't acts of rebellion, they were declarations of freedom. Letting go hadn't meant losing. It meant choosing. Choosing what to carry forward. What to leave behind. People often think revenge is loud courtroom battles, dramatic confrontations, cutting words. But sometimes, the most powerful revenge is silence. It's grace. It's walking away with your head high while the other person drowns in the emptiness they created. Andrew wanted a reaction. Claire wanted satisfaction. What they got was stillness. Natalie didn't need to prove her worth. She lived it now in every meal she cooked for her kids, in every bedtime story she read without bitterness, in every morning she woke up and didn't feel afraid anymore. She wasn't who she had been in that courtroom. She wasn't the woman clinging to dignity with trembling hands. She was something else now. Whole. And as she looked out at the quiet street, coffee in hand, sunlight warming her face, she whispered not out loud, but to herself, and with conviction. I'm still standing. And that, in the end, was everything. A week after returning everything, Natalie received an email from Andrew's attorney. It was short, cold, a simple confirmation that all items had been received, no thank you, no acknowledgement, not even a note from Andrew himself. Natalie read it once and deleted it without hesitation. There was no satisfaction to be found in his silence, and she didn't need it. That was the moment she realized the real victory wasn't in what she gave back, it was in what she refused to carry forward. Because peace is not something someone hands you. It's something you claim when you decide the past no longer deserves your energy. To anyone listening, if you've ever been hurt, used, or humiliated, remember this: you don't always need to fight back with fury. Sometimes the most powerful act of revenge is walking away with grace, dignity, and your heart intact. Natalie didn't just survive, she rebuilt, quietly, fully, on her own terms. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever had to let go of someone who never deserved you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below. You're stronger than you know. And you're not alone.